Sziasztok! The Hungarian Heritage Podcast is back for Season 3, and we are Hungarian Heritage Stronger Than Ever. For those of you who have been here a while, welcome back, and thanks so much for sticking around. And for those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome! I'm so happy that you're joining us. My name is Christine, and I'm the host here at the Hungarian Heritage Podcast. During Season 3, I will continue to bring you guests and topics that celebrate Hungarian culture, people, and food. And of course, we will feature all of the cool things that Hungarians are doing around the world. Together, we will discover new things and review things that you may already know. And most of all, we will have a lot of fun along the way. One episode at a time, we will build those bridges between Hungarians who live in Hungary to those who live in other parts of the world. Not to mention the bridges we will build between the generations. So, if you're looking to make that first connection to your Hungarian heritage, or you're looking to strengthen your connection, then you found the right place. Join me, and together we will connect your modern lives to your Hungarian heritage by expanding this Hungarian heritage community and making the circles of Hungarians around us Hungarian heritage strong. Welcome to this episode of the Hungarian Heritage Podcast. Staying true to the vision of connecting the circles of Hungarians around us, I would like to welcome all of you to this new series of Celebrating Hungarian Heritage Together. Previously, my guests on the podcast, Reka Bakos and Anna Fenyvesi, the authors of Hungarian Roots and American Dreams, will be my co-hosts for various episodes throughout Season 3 as we celebrate Hungarian Heritage Together. This new series will feature guests who have contributed their personal and family's stories in Reka and Anna's newly released book. In this episode, I am thrilled to announce that my co-host will be Reka Bakos, and together we will be featuring Aaron Melville's Hungarian heritage story that was featured in Hungarian Roots and American Dreams. As Aaron shares his family story, you will not only learn of his family's journey from Hungary to America, but you will learn about his clever genealogy research tactics that helped him connect more of the branches of his Hungarian family tree. Listen along as we celebrate Hungarian heritage together. Please join me in welcoming back to the Hungarian Heritage Podcast Reka Bakos, co-author of the newly released book, Hungarian Roots and American Dreams, and she was my guest along with her co-author in the first episode of Season 3. Reka's here today not as my guest, but as my co-host for a series of episodes that feature contributing authors from her book. Welcome back, Reka. I'm excited to partner with you on this series. Can you reintroduce yourself to the listeners and give us a little overview of your newly released book, Hungarian Roots and American Dreams?
Hi, Christine. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So, hi, everyone. For those of you who haven't heard the previous discussion, I'm Reka Bakos, and as Christine previously mentioned, I co-edited Hungarian Roots and American Dreams, tracing personal history with my colleague Anna Fenyvesi. This book is a collection of 48 inspiring stories about Hungarian immigrants and their descendants. I live in Tata, Hungary, with my husband and my son, who just turned 8. And this is where I pursue my passion for writing family history and capturing the details that make these stories really meaningful. So through this podcast series and also other initiatives, I aim to inspire others to bring their family history to life and share those stories that connect generations. And it's a really pleasure to be here with you today and co-hosting alongside Christine. And it's my absolute honor to introduce our guest today, Aaron Melville, one of the incredible authors featured in our book. So, Aaron, thank you so much for joining us on this episode to share your story with the wider audience. And we are really thrilled to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Reka and Christine.
Yes, welcome. I'm so excited that you're here and that you're able to broadcast your story in another area through this podcast, because I know after we spoke, you have a pretty exciting story to tell. So we're going to go through that. Thank you so much, Reka, for reintroducing yourself. And I'm excited that we're partnering on this series as well. So let's get started. Aaron, how long have you been researching your family history? So before we start talking about your contribution to the book,
Mhm.
where did this journey begin for you?
So my research into family history started about 12 years ago. My dad and I had attended a genealogy class and how to use ancestry.com at the library in the town that we lived in. And so we attended that, and off the bat from that, I was basically hooked. And so it was kind of looking at all of my sides of my family. So whether it was my dad's side, my grandma on my mom's side, my grandpa on my mom's side, who was the Hungarian side. So it started with that. And then it just kind of I kept kind of a constant flow of researching over the years. And then I got more serious about it maybe about 3 years ago.
Wow, that's pretty exciting. So I guess it's safe to say that your dad was a pretty big inspiration for you to start researching.
Correct, because he had gone to this class with me, and I know he had had an ancestry family tree built up, but it wasn't as in depth as I would have put
Right.
it.
So how did you and your dad actually say, hey, we should go do this class and take our research further? Was there like a conversation that you had one day over, let's just say a holiday dinner or,
Mhm.
one Wednesday night when you were having dinner? How did that happen for you?
To be honest, I really don't remember. I was only about 10 years old at the time, and we had just
Oh,
moved to a new place. And so I think we were trying to explore what the libraries looked like there and just try and get out and do things. And so he saw this, and I'd already started kind of gaining an interest in family history because that was the time I started asking my grandpa all the questions.
right.
So my dad had decided, hey, let's go to this. And um, it kind of started everything.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing that like a move to a new place
Hmm.
at a young age where your dad was just trying to, get a feel for the new town or city that you were living in. And, it's so typical to take, a child, because you were a child at the time, to the library to discover new things. And look where it's led you now. So
Yeah.
that's pretty inspiring.
Yeah, and I think the other untypical thing about this that you were so young, Aaron, because people don't
Hmm.
typically start genealogy at the age of 10.
I agree.
So, can you tell the listeners how you found the Hungarian Roots and American Dreams Facebook group, just for the listeners who don't know the story? So, the whole book initiative started with the Facebook groups with people who have Hungarian roots. And after you joined the Facebook group, my next question would be: did you gain any other insights from the group members? Any of things you found, or any inspiration that you gained from the membership?
So how I had found the group was I had joined this group on Facebook. It was a Hungarian genealogy group called Családfakutatas Segítés Tipek, and I had um I had just kind of posted in there about my family, and I was trying to look for living relatives in Hungary. And that post ended up getting over 2,000 shares, and I had like 50 Facebook message requests. And I thought, wow, isn't this pretty neat? But then I think just about a week or two later, Reka had posted about creating Hungarian Roots and American Dreams, or Ohazabo is Világba. And I saw that and I was like, I wonder if Americans can join this too, because, I'm a Hungarian American. And so I joined it. I remember it was like February 28th, and I had joined it and I put in Hungarian, my family story, where my great great grandparents were born and my great grandfather's life and his aunts and uncles and everything. And the response was pretty overwhelming. It was really nice. And I think it was one of the first like 10 or 15 posts in the group too. So I thought that was pretty neat that it had just started and, I was able to get involved in it. Um, Insights from people in the group. I would say one of the biggest things that's really helped is just understanding a lot of like Hungarian cultural norms and also certain translations, because I found pictures that have had Hungarian written on the back, and it's not necessarily very well written Hungarian. It's kind of like backroads country Hungarian. So I've had those translated in the group, and just having other insights from people and being able to connect with Hungarians who live in Hungary and Hungarians who live in America and people who are American that have had Hungarian roots, just like me. So hearing their stories and seeing how their how the bits of their lives have played into being Hungarian and how similar it is to mine.
That's a pretty insightful answer. So, actually, I have a question regarding obviously, Reka's Facebook group is still a live Facebook group, which is something we can talk about at the end of the episode about joining, so that if you also have questions about your Hungarian roots, or if anyone out there is looking to join this group to, advance their Hungarian heritage roots search, we can definitely do that. But the Facebook group that you first mentioned, maybe Reka, can you translate what that Facebook group is, what Aaron joined? And we will also leave that information in the show notes too, because
Yeah,
that could be a good tool for people going forward.
yeah. I think it was just renamed.
Okay.
It was.
Okay.
Yeah, but originally it was Családfakutatás segítség és tippek, so family root search, helps and tips. And
Okay.
it was a really kind of operational thing to, can you, read this transcript for me, or can you help me how to navigate family search or ancestry? And now they are also moving towards DNA. So how to use DNA results, what that means, who should, try that out. But I think the more, or at least my experience is that the more genealogy groups you join, the more you learn. Because both all of them have different perspective, different goals, and you need to filter out the information you need. And I'm really happy, Aaron, that you were in that group.
Of course, absolutely. We'll definitely leave a lot of that information in the show notes, but I feel like your story, which you haven't even told yet, is pretty inspirational. So I wanted people to know as they continue to listen that we'll definitely leave that information for them later on, because those would be helpful tips. So, Reka, I have a question for you, my co-host. How did you and Anna narrow down the stories for your book, and how did you choose, or why did you choose Aaron's story?
Yeah, so Christine, to be completely honest with you, we didn't need to narrow down for the first edition. And I think it was really nice because all the stories that started to show up in the Facebook group were amazing. Some of them were really sad or heartbreaking. Some of them were really beautiful and heartwarming. And we wanted to include, all types of feeling, not just the shiny, happy buzz, but, because there were two world wars after our ancestors emigrated, revolution, communism. So many, many sad things also happened. And we just wanted this collection to reflect the reality, the good side, and also the bad side. So we didn't really select stories. The only constraint was the time. So whether the authors will be able to write it on time. We have just initiated volume 2 last week, and this, I feel, will be the book where we will need to start selecting, because we already have like 40 plus stories on our watch list.
Wow, that's amazing.
And before I ask Aaron to share his story, it was the first I read. So we had, I think, April something as the deadline, and I was going alphabetical order. And, Aaron was definitely the first. And I remember I was sitting in a cafe in Tata. It was a rainy day. Everything was gloomy. And I just sat there with laptop on my lap. I was reading the story, and, the ladies came with my tea. I had tears rolling from my eyes, and they were just looking at me. Is this lady crazy or something? But no, so it's such a beautifully written story. And now I will ask Aaron to share this also with our listeners.
Well, thank you, Reka. I really appreciate that. I know every time I reread my story after sending it in, I would always kind of cry, and I'd be at work looking over it, and I'd be sobbing sitting in my cubicle. So I totally understand that. So my story's name is Echoes of Home: Rediscovering Our Hungarian Legacy.
Right.
And so it starts off with the birth of my great-great-grandfather János Bódis and my great-great-grandmother Juliana Santasi. János was born in Megyek-Balezskai in Baranya County, and he was born on the August 20th of 1858. My great-great-grandmother Juliana Santasi, she was born, I want to say February 17th, 1867 in Közeliget, which is kind of on the border of Tolna, Somogy, and Baranya counties in Hungary. And so it starts off with some of the research that I've found over the past 100 years before their lives, because I've been able to get back to see their ancestors up to their third great grandparents in some cases. And they lived primarily, the Bodish side lived primarily in Mechekbaleshke and also Hosuheting, which is also just a village about 10 minutes away from Mechekbaleshke. And then on my great great grandmother's side, Juliana, her mother's name was Taricia Miklovic, and she was from Dombovar. And then her father's name was József Shantashi, and he was from like Atala, Nagyberki, and Dombovar area, but they lived in that area. So I start out with that. I say that they came from farming families because they did. There's always the allegations of, oh, we had nobility in our family, but I haven't been able to find anything on that. So I also include in that first section of my story a letter that was written from my great grandfather to his nephew Arpad, who was someone who was very interested in genealogy back in the 1980s, and my great grandfather was still alive to share that with him. And it was a letter just describing their background, what he knew from his childhood, and of course, I'm sure there was much more, but at that point he was in his upper 70s, so he might not have remembered very well. So I shared that excerpt. That letter was shared with me in 2017 from Arpad's granddaughter, actually. So I've had that letter for a while.
Wow.
And then I just kind of move on to just their lives in Hungary when they moved around, when they got married. They got married in July of 1883 in Bukast in Baranya County, which is just a little bit outside of Pécs. And so they got married. I want to say she had 13 of her kids in Hungary,
Wow.
but only 6 lived to past childhood. And so those were the 6 that came with them. Their names were János, István, Vendel, Sándor, Juliana, and Maria. And so they were the ones who were able to come to America with them. And then they lived in a few places around Hungary, and I just mentioned where they had lived. So then they came to America on May 29th, 1907. They landed at the port of New York. They took the Ultonia, and they departed from Fiume. So they were destined to head to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where they met with a man named József Vidalovich. József was from their hometown, and I've actually kind of found out within the last week or so.
Wow.
He might have a potential living relative that I've reached out to, but she hasn't gotten back to me, because I noticed on Family Search that someone was adding sources, and her name was Catherine Tolt, and she'd just been adding sources within the last 2 weeks. And so I reached out to her. I'm hoping to hear back, because I'm hoping she has more stories.
Yeah, I actually just want to say before you move forward is two things. Number one, I feel like genealogy research seems to be like in your DNA. If like right, because like you have that letter from your was it your uncle or great uncle, right?
Yeah, it was from my great grandfather to his nephew, so it was my grandpa's cousin,
right?
But his granddaughter sent it to me,
right? And then also too, the amazing part of genealogy research, because we discussed this podcast episode a few weeks ago. And in that interim, people are still updating, the family research and the genealogy. And it's something that we touched upon in the episode, that it's a micro history that just keeps growing. Like your micro history, you're finding more and more about it as the days go on. And because it's like a living document, essentially.
Yeah, Christine, actually you inspired us with Anna to think that through, and we are calling now that Living Family Chronicle, because it's spanning generations, so it's not just a personal history like we originally intended. And I think Erin is a perfect example how these stories don't end here, because you are always finding something, a new connection, new piece of information. And then I really hope that what we are creating, we can also give it to our kids and grandkids, and they continue to grow these chronicles.
Yeah, that's really well said. It's a living family chronicle. And I feel like you're the textbook example for everyone else. So,
and I feel like it should expand just beyond like my direct ancestors, but I like finding out history about the sisters and the brothers and the cousins and the people they met and the people they associated with. I mean, I'm trying to find out every little piece that I can because those people's stories matter just as much as my own and my own ancestors. And it
Absolutely.
might inspire them to do that
Yeah,
too.
because essentially you're their family also.
Hmm.
So like, if they did genealogy research, they could stumble upon you as being connected to you as well. So
Hmm.
you're just as important to them as they are to you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And so, I mean, it's amazing how far it has all come and how more interconnected we all are.
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, so I didn't mean to interrupt your flow,
no,
but
you're
I thought that was like a really important thing to bring up about your steadfast research.
I don't want to blab on too much about it. I
No,
just
go
hit
ahead.
the
That's why we're here. We're here to
so
listen.
so the next part of my story basically goes to the Hungarian colony in Manville. And that was when my great great grandfather purchased a tract of land from the Consolidated Farm Company. From what I have found out from the Historical Society up there, is that basically you would purchase pieces of tracts of land. In return, you would work the land. And so a lot of Hungarians had come up from Milwaukee to live on this farm.
Mm,
And so it was, I think I want to say upwards of 30 or 40 people in total.
wow.
There may have been more, but I've looked at the census records and there were quite a few Hungarian names that I end up seeing later on in Dubuque, Iowa, where my family moved to after that. Um, and so they were on the farm. My great grandfather was born on the farm, which is what I get to next in the story. So I talk about the birth of my great grandfather, just his life growing up. He grew up on the farm, of course, for at least those 2 years, and then he moved to Dubuque, Iowa. Then he moved back to Wisconsin. They lived around Wisconsin, and he had brothers. His oldest brother was about 23 years older than him. So there was very big age gaps. His cousin, his nephew Arpad was actually only a few years younger than him. So it's it's interesting because he kind of grew up when a lot of other people in my family had already been, they'd already had families, they'd been married, they had lives. And
Sure.
so I talk about that. And then following that, I speak regarding his marriage to my great grandmother and then the birth of my grandfather Gerald, who was born in May of 1943. He passed, or his grandmother, Bill's mom, passed away just about a month after he was born. So unfortunately, he did not grow up with any grandparents because Bill's dad, Janos, had already passed away, and then both of his mom's parents had passed away. His mom's mother had passed away when his mom was only about 5 years old. So he didn't have any grandparents. He didn't have any of those sources that he could have directly talked to. So not that his knowledge was limited necessarily, but I don't know how much his dad spoke about in his life. Um,
I mean, that's
but
definitely a factor too, sometimes with,
mhm,
immigration, like depending on what someone's situation was when they came to the
mhm,
US or even, if you were born to an immigrant, you might not know the answers, or if you went through any type of traumatic situation, generally people aren't as open with stories when it comes to that.
And I think just trying to accommodate to everything there, the language, the
Sure.
mhm,
society, the people around. So I can even imagine that you try to forget that you came from Hungary because you
Yeah.
just
mhm,
wanna fit in.
Also depends on the age as well,
mhm,
because I feel like as an adult, you will have more experiences that you're bringing. But if you came over as a child, there's not as many life experiences that you've had,
mhm,
and you're also like Reka, like you said, you're trying to assimilate and learn the new language and just
mhm.
kind of survive as a kid. So sorry,
And
continue,
and
Aaron.
no, you're fine. And I feel like in a way my great grandfather, because he actually served, and I didn't know this until more recently. He served in the Army National Guard in Iowa.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I wasn't aware of that. I never knew he had any sort of military service. And my grandfather served in the military as well. And also his brothers had served in the military during World War One when they were still Hungarian citizens, but they were taking
Wow.
anybody that they could.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think all of them went, and I don't think they did much, but I know that it's interesting because my great great grandfather Janusz, when he came to America, he was 48 years old, and my great great grandmother was 38, 39. So they were older, and
Sure.
they had a large range of children. Their youngest child who was alive was born in 1902 in Chaniosoro, which is just right outside of the last place they lived in Baranya County, Vaislo.
Mhm.
So she was about 5 years old when she came to America, whereas her oldest brother was 21 years old because he was born in 1886.
Wow.
So there was definitely a large age gap. And then they also had Juliana's brother Gabor. He had also come over to America in 1907, but he ended up going back to Hungary in 1911, and he stayed there for about a year or two. He got married, brought his wife and her sister over. Her sister ended up marrying one of my great grandpa's brothers, Vendel. So it was it was definitely a wide range of variety that they had in the family. I mean, I know my great grandfather, he only spoke Hungarian growing up until he went to school. So, and his mother could not speak English, from what I was told. His father could because his father did have to work.
Mhm.
He worked in a door and sash factory in Dubuque until he was 73. He retired just about 10 years before he passed away. So he spent most of his life working.
Before we go into Bill's story, I just wanted to ask you to share the story of John and Julia, the photo that we added to the book, kind of last minute, because I think that's also a great example why writing family story can be important, because you already had all those facts, right?
Hmm.
Before you started writing it down. But when you start to illustrate a story, you realize that you might be missing documents or missing
Hmm.
photos. So can you tell us what that photo is about and how you found it?
Okay, so yeah, I had tried to connect with more family members, and there is one grandchild that I know of, one grandchild of Janos and Juliana, who is still living. Only one. And that is my grandpa's cousin, Paul Jr. So he is the son of Paul Emmerich, who was born in 1911 in Dubuque. He was the youngest and last child of Janos and Juliana, and his son, Paul, is still alive. He is, I believe, 87 or 88. And so I connected with his children, and one of his nephews or one of his children who is so funny enough, his name is Bill. Bill sent me some photos one day that he said that he had found. And so I had only ever in my life seen one picture of Janos Boys. I had only ever seen the one picture that I have with him, Juliana, and Istvan. That's the only one I've ever had. And there was pictures of Paul Senior, Istvan, um, Janos and Juliana, and then there was one of just Janos and Juliana with each other. And it was the first picture where I could ever see them smiling and
Aw.
just with each other. And so it it it, it kind of put into perspective, like, wow, I don't have everything. I mean, I found pictures of Juliana from my great grandfather's collection that I've gotten within the last year, but I never had the pictures of two of them together like that. I mean, and they could have maybe been going to church. They could have just been posing for photos in the yard. I mean, it looked like it was cold out, so I'm assuming it was probably winter. Um,
And
but it
I
was
have to
just,
say, I don't mean to interrupt you again.
no, you're fine.
People don't realize, how important a picture was
Hmm.
Yeah.
a long time ago, because we live in this digital world. You're taking albums worth of photos on your phone on a daily basis, where a picture was a special moment.
Hmm.
So when you look at that picture, like, that was a special moment in their lives. It could have been a special day, like you said. And I feel like that really hits home because we don't have as many memories
Hmm.
from our ancestors because, the pictures were limited.
Exactly. And, finding them is such a treasure.
Mm.
It's like there's one that, so I had visited my uncle earlier this year, and he had some photo albums, and they had mixed pictures of his life growing up, my mom's life. It had some pictures of my grandma and grandpa's lives, but there was one picture that really, it was sticking out of the out of like the foil or the clear cover, and it was very, you could tell it was very old, and it was of these two men and two younger boys on a farm, like standing next to like a conveyor belt and some like cut up like wood or like yard trimmings of some kind, or what I found out later was chaff or something. And I found out it was the earliest picture that I have of my great grandfather,
Wow.
because he was standing there in the back right, and he was next to his brother Paul, and then two of the neighbors, and then I flipped over the back and it was all written in Hungarian. And I thought, oh my goodness. And my mom recognized it immediately that it was Hungarian because she couldn't understand it. She knew it was of her grandfather and knew that like I said, they only spoke Hungarian growing up. So she handed it over to me, and I was actually able to post that into the Facebook group and had it translated. But the last line that I understood was Willie Ish Apali, which was Willie and Paul. So
Oh.
I just knew from then that was my great grandfather and his brother in that picture. And um, they looked like they just had a hard day of work, but my great grandfather was still smiling. So it was really nice to see, and kind to see the resemblance in, when I was a child too. Um, so it's definitely, I wish I had so many more pictures. I know there are so many more pictures out there. And that's why I'm grateful that even my cousins, who I don't even know, and I mean, they live about an hour or two away from me, and I could meet them. They probably have so many more. And I've gotten them interested in it because of this, because I've been able to share the story of our family, and they feel like they can contribute as well. And I would hope they would continue to contribute.
Wow.
There
Yeah,
was one.
That's pretty
and
exciting.
yeah, and I think that's the power of writing family history, that it connects you with living relatives who you
Mhm,
might have never spoken to, or
mhm.
who you meet once a year, or I don't
Yeah.
know, every second year. But it also connects generations. Like, you
Hmm.
can reach out to that close to 90-year-old relative of yours.
Hmm.
And I really hope that when we get old, we can also get the, following generations excited in that because of the stories we have written.
I
Hmm.
agree. I agree. And I feel like sometimes it just takes one or two people in a large family or a large group just to have that spark, that inspiration to do that, to do the research, because sometimes people are nervous to take a risk,
Hmm.
really with anything in life. So we can make that analogy. But, maybe your spark and your interest and your inspiration will lead more people in your extended family to have more courage to, do some more research and connect with you on this project. I feel like this could be a whole volume. Uh,
And I would hope that they would be able to connect with me, because there are pieces that they have that might help me, and I know I've had pieces that have
mm,
helped them, because I know one of my cousins, he is the grandson of Janos, and Janos Jr., the one who was born in 1886, who married Juliana Schuster. Um, he sent me over some of his documents that he had, and he wanted more information about the Miklevich side of the family, and I had all of that stuff because I'd been able to find it. Um, so I was able to send that over to him, and of course, we haven't communicated recently, but I would hope that, it would inspire those sides of my family. I mean, I know my mom has never really, I mean, she remembers her grandfather talking about a lot of family history when she was a child, but she didn't listen because she wasn't as very interested. And she's told me that. And, she says, wow, I really wish I would have listened to my grandfather more, because this would have been so valuable.
right. Well, everyone has their own passions. So,
Exactly.
so this is your passion, and your mom probably remembers more than she thinks, and the more
Hmm.
research that
Yeah.
you do will probably spark memories because I know that happens to me. I'll remember something and I'm like, how did I forget that? How did I
Hmm.
forget that, we used to do this or used to do that, or my grandmother would say this. And, sometimes it's just the process of the research and the
Hmm.
continuation and just really having that inspiration to keep going, which is important.
Not to bring it back, but following that part of the story where he meets my great grandmother and they have my grandpa, I go on about the boat that he built, the Cindy Marie, which is named after my mother. So he had started it in 1968, and it took him about 6.5 years to build. He spent what was equivalent to like $200,000
Wow.
US and 81 million forint on this boat and in materials. He built it all by himself as a Hungarian American farmer in landlocked rural Iowa. He on December 2nd, it's the 50th anniversary is actually on Monday.
Oh, wow.
On
Wow.
December 2nd, 1974, he launched it into the Mississippi River. And he was on it, I think, for about a year. And so it garnered national attention. He was on CBS, on the road with Charles Kuralt. There's books. You can still go on YouTube and find videos of him.
That's pretty
Um,
cool.
on
If
Charles,
you send me those links, I will definitely add them in the show notes so people can take a look at those
oh, for
videos. That'd be
sure.
great.
And you can even look up, like, if you search up Charles Kuralt, there's
Yeah.
people that have written articles on Charles Kuralt, like forgiving him, and because I know he had a troubled life, and you can
Yeah.
leave that part out. But
Sure, sure.
and you can look up, and they say we really love the inspiring story of the Iowan farmer Bill Bodish who built the boat, Cindy Marie.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because that was something I knew of my entire life, but I never really it's named after my mom, so I
There's a lot of parallels between his personality and yours, like the determination that he had to build a boat on a farm in rural Iowa, and then your determination to just keep going with your
Mhm.
genealogy research. You could see it's in your DNA.
Yeah, and I think I do get that from him because I know he was, and maybe it's something about being Hungarian and just having the willpower to do anything that you want. And,
Absolutely.
I know he was a very proud Hungarian man.
Also, let's share why did he build the boat? So what was his intention with it?
Okay, so his goal was to sail across the world.
Oh,
He had built this, it was a 58-foot long yacht. He had built
wow.
it entirely on the farm with all the materials that he had. He had learned how to weld, and he took his 30 years of tool making experience and farming and welding and just I mean, it was incredible what he had done. And so he was planning to sail down through the Horn of Africa, up through the Indian Madagascar coast, down to Singapore, New Zealand, Monte Carlo, to Hungary. I mean, he had planned to go all over. And so they made it down into the Caribbean. And my great grandmother was absolutely terrified of the storms that they'd encountered. Somewhere
Mm.
near, I want to say it was like Bahamas, somewhere down in that like Caribbean area. And they had decided to call it quits because she didn't she once they got back to land, she flew back to Iowa to
Mm.
visit family. And she was not coming back down to Florida unless he was going to get rid of that boat. And so he ended up staying with his cousin, Mary Shantashi. She had lived in Miami, Florida, and they stayed with her for a little bit, and then she came back down. They sold the boat to I believe it's some Cuban guys. It actually ended up, I found out later, getting seized by the Drug Enforcement Agency because it was used as a drug boat.
Okay.
Wow.
So it's
And
famous. I mean,
yeah, it
infamous,
was
right?
it was it was renamed the Maria. So where it is now, I have no idea. I still want to
Okay.
find it.
Yeah.
It's
I'm pretty
probably
sure
off
you
the
can.
it's
You're
probably
so
off the
good at
coast of
research.
Cuba somewhere.
Yeah. And I also want to point out
Hmm.
the endeavor that your grandfather like undertook with building this boat, there were,
Hmm.
I mean, I'm not sure about you, but I've looked at YouTube of how to do things, how to fix things, how to do things around the house. There was no YouTube. I wondered while you were telling the story, like, did he go to the library to
He did.
find out how to build a boat, how to do all these things?
He
I
did.
mean, the work that went into this is not something that you could take lightly. Like there was a lot of research, like reading research, not YouTube, um, back in the day.
Correct. And he had spent, I mean, he had had a patent published in 1959 for a hay baling machine.
Oh,
And so that was about 10 years before he started with the boat. So I think he was a very intelligent man. That is what
yeah,
I've been told. And I've seen what he has done. I have the patent actually at home that
that's
was
great.
sent from Washington, and it has all of the details and the measurements. And I
Wow.
mean, he did that in 1959. He was 50 years old when he did
Wow.
that.
That'd be nice
And
artwork for your wall.
it is right now I have it stored away, thankfully, because I don't want
Yeah,
it to get destroyed, but I
sure.
probably would. Um, yeah, I know it took a long time, and he definitely had I know he had troubles with certain things and making sure everything worked properly, but um, he had that determination, like you said.
Right.
And so once he got rid of the boat, he actually ended up buying a van and converting it into like a camper van,
Of
and
course.
drove
Right.
across the country, drove into Canada. Um, and they were in that for a few years, and then they retired and moved to Rockford, Illinois, which is where I'm from, and which is where my grandfather and grandmother and my mom and uncle were living. So, and then I just talk about the end of their lives. Um, and then I go on about my mother met my father. He is of Swedish or Norwegian, Czech, and Scottish ancestry. Um, and then so I talk about my first time in Hungary and how that really kickstarted my
Right.
journey, because I went to Hungary in July of 2019 and I fell in love with the country. And I remember looking out the window of the bus. We were driving through Nógrád and Pest County, and I was looking over and I saw these beautiful sunflowers. I don't know, I can't remember the last time I saw sunflowers here in the United States. I mean, I do live in Illinois, which is pretty rural, but it's mainly like corn and stuff.
Hmm.
But I saw these sunflowers and they were just so pretty. And I just remember we're about an hour or so north of Budapest, in around like Berkenya and Vats, and I just was crying. All I could think was, "Oh my goodness, I wish I could call my grandpa right now and tell him I'm home. It is so beautiful here." I mean, I, it felt so surreal. I mean, I remember going to the border and seeing Magyarország and just thinking, "Oh my goodness, as in Hozam." Like
Oh,
I'm just so happy that I'm home. Like it,
you
it,
do
it
feel that feeling, right? That like you were just
I
meant to be there.
it felt like I had been there before. It didn't
Right.
feel foreign whatsoever. I really felt like I had had another life there.
Yeah. Well, this is not me tearing up at all, but
I don't mean to make you
no,
cry.
no, no, that's great. I mean, honestly, like I know exactly what you mean. Like those sunflower fields are just amazing also.
They
But
were so pretty.
so there's a part of your story. Can you tell us about when you emailed the priest in Boranya, I believe it was, right?
Yeah, it so
Because that's a great
there
part of your story.
there were two actually. So the
Tell
first
us.
one that I had gotten in contact with, so I following all of this, and I'd been able to get my documents for the United States. We'd found my great grandfather's birth certificate, which we didn't know where it was, and then we found it one day. Um, and I decided I wanted to pursue Hungarian citizenship, and that would take learning the language and having the Hungarian documents. I tried reaching out to the consulate. Unfortunately, I was not able to go far because these documents were from before 1895, so there really wasn't much they could do. So I thought, well, I'm going to start joining Facebook groups and seeing what I can do. And I had joined a Facebook group for the Kercelegat Mostos Nagyverki Romai Katolikus Templom. And or plebania, and I had joined it, and I wrote a little message saying like Sziasztok, America van élek, like I'm looking for someone who can I'm looking for the priest so he can issue my great great grandmother's baptism certificate. And I I sent him an email. He had responded and gave me his email. I'd sent him an email. And then a few days, I think it was a few days or a few weeks later, I had gotten a PayPal request for like 1100 forint. And I had to look up the conversion rate because I didn't know how much that was. And it was only like US dollars. And so I saw that and I was like, oh, he's actually going to issue it to me. And so he issued that. It took about 2 months to get here, which was insane. And then the second one, I had done, I had been trying to find if, because I needed my great great grandfather's baptism certificate as well, which was issued in Magyarszék, which because Meczek Paleski did not have a church, so he was baptized at the one in Magyarszék. And so I sent an email. It was just like Magyarszék plebania or something like that at gmail.com. I didn't know if I would ever hear back. I just found it on, I think, Facebook. And 2 days later, I got an email back saying, okay, I'm going to send this to you. It's free of charge. We don't want any money. Just please pray for us. And so I thought that was very generous of the priest, Matias Imre. I thought it was very generous of him to send that because when I got my great great grandparents' marriage certificate from it's like Edge has something.
Edge has media or
yes, the from Page. That was like 20 US dollars. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is so expensive. But I joined a group for St. Lawrence because the priest for St. Lawrence, because my great great grandparents were married in Bucharest, and the priest for Bucharest was also the priest for St. Lawrence. I joined the Facebook group and writing, hey, I need my great great grandparents' marriage certificate. And everyone in the comments were putting his phone number
Oh my
and
goodness.
just all of his contact information. I sent him a text message. Unfortunately, I never heard back from him, so that's why I had to go to the Edgeheismedia because it was I had to get it somehow because I needed to prove that my great grandfather was a legitimate child of my great great grandparents because they do require that for citizenship when you're going back so far. So yeah, I tried to, and this was before I'd even joined the Hungarian genealogy Facebook groups. This was early on in 2023, and like I had just started kind of really seriously going into this. I hadn't even started my Hungarian classes yet, so I was using Google Translate to put all my posts out there. And so I think it's unique how the internet can connect us all and how we're able to get things done. And these were complete strangers. I sent this man $4 US. I mean, that's not a lot, but I'm sure 1,000 forint it's money. I was sending this random guy money and expecting him to send this document. I didn't get it for 2 months.
To follow up on the promise. Exactly.
Exactly. I was nervous. And so it's kind of putting your trust in people. And I mean, that's kind of what has led me to my just overall, I mean, beyond my first trip to Hungary, being just the way that it was and how people were so warm and welcoming, but the absolute just generosity and kindness that I've gotten from Hungarians since then, whether it be through online or be through the Hungarian school that's here in Chicago. I've never met an unhappy Hungarian, no matter how stone-faced they may be. My mom and I joke that we have these mean-looking faces that people always ask us, "Oh, what's wrong? You look so sad." It's just our face.
I feel like I've heard that comment so many times in my life,
especially here in America, because here in America, you're always expected to be smiling and happy. Like, sorry, I'm concentrated, I'm working, and I'm just Hungarian. I'm sorry, but no, I just the generosity and the kindness and the warmth of Hungarians. I have never once felt like even though I'm American and I have all these other mixed ancestries, I have never felt such a connection with those that I have with my Hungarian sides. And I think that is part to do with my grandpa. My other grandfather had passed away when I was like 2 years old. So I only had one grandfather growing up. So
Right.
just my connection with him, and my mom and him were very close. And so just having that and having the connections with Hungarians that I do now, and like I said, the warmth, generosity. I mean, I have never once felt like I needed to question being Hungarian, or that, my family's Hungarian, even though I may not speak the language very well. I may not be fully Hungarian ethnicity wise. I feel like even in my heart, I'm still completely Hungarian and American at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that way too. I feel what you're saying, and you're
Hmm.
not the only person that has those feelings. So that it must be true that there's just something about the culture, the feeling, the warmth of the people, even people who live in the US that are,
Hmm.
full Hungarian or may have been born in Hungary. They say that, even when you visit,
Hmm.
Hungarians appreciate that even if you try a few words, they're so excited that you've said a few words in Hungarian. And once you tell them that you're also Hungarian, it's
Hmm.
like this big open arms, welcoming. Yeah, so you're not alone. So what you're
Hmm.
feeling is pretty common, which is pretty amazing about the culture.
It is.
Yeah,
And I know I experienced that when I was there. I mean, it was amazing.
that's great.
So,
Okay.
Aaron, you mentioned how writing this family history brought you closer to with your cousins and uncles and aunts in the U.S.
Hmm.
Did you manage to trace any relatives who still live in Hungary?
So I have, in a few ways. There was one who was a potential relative, and he had found out from my post in Család Fakatata Tipek. And he had messaged me. He was from the same village, and he had sent me pictures of his grandfather's passport. And his grandfather was very much of a resemblance of my family, and the same last name, Boris. And so I talked with him, but my Hungarian was not very good.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't able to really keep up with him, and we just ended up losing contact. And then there was another that I actually have been able to reach out to. I haven't heard back from him though in a few months. His name's Imre, and he's from Dombovar, and he's related to my Shantashi side, which I did not even know that there was even any. And then there was another who we were related. We're like, I believe, third cousins or something. And her father was born in Hungary, but came here during the 56 revolution. And she lives in New York. And so I've been in
Wow.
contact with her. But those are the only like Hungarian relatives that I've had so far. I'm sure there are more because, Facebook only goes so far.
Mhm.
Even though it seems like all Hungarians have Facebook. I'm sure that there are
Yeah.
more people, like little 90-year-old nudge mamas who don't, have phones or
Yeah.
anything. So
Yeah.
And maybe we can let the listeners know to a little secret that you are coming to Hungary again in February, right?
Ooh,
And you
that's
have
yes,
exciting.
plans visiting those little villages where the Nagymamas live. So tell us
Oh,
yes.
a little bit more about those plans.
yeah.
Oh, so it's a long flight. I will not arrive until like 6 p.m. the next day. It's gonna be a long day. So I'll be coming to Hungary for the book launch in Szeged on February 7th. And so I'll be there. I'll be speaking there. Thankfully, Reka and Anna have offered me that very generous offer to speak, and I will see if I'm going to do it in Hungarian or English. I definitely have to write a lot of notes if it was in Hungarian. So um, I plan on. I'm actually going to be staying in Hosuhetén, which is one of the villages my family's from. So I was very
Wow.
lucky to find an accommodation there. And so I will be going around to the villages. I plan to spend Monday and Tuesday that following week in Budapest, just exploring more because I've been once, but you can't explore Budapest in just 2 days. And
No,
I'm definitely not going to be able to explore it in these 2 days, but I
no.
want to visit the archives.
Sure.
And see documents there. I've already created my little account online with the e-leveltar, and making sure I'm signed up for that. And I'll be there for about a week, which is it'll be my longest time in Hungary, but thankfully the flights were reasonably priced, and I fly from Chicago to London and then London to Budapest, which it's going to be interesting, but
I think it's going to be great. Well, first of all,
I
what an honor to speak at the book launch in
it
Szeged.
is,
Like that,
and
congratulations.
thank you. And I really wish I could have gone to the one in Pittsburgh, but I didn't have a car at the time, except 2 days before the book launch. I actually got my car.
Right.
So I could have driven out there, but it was just not feasible. So
Right.
I had kind of accepted that. And I thought that weekend, like, okay, I missed this book launch in Pittsburgh. I missed all of the great people that I could have met. How much are flights to Hungary right now?
It's funny. Don't go
And
to the close one. Let's go to the furthest one, right?
and it's funny because I would have spent about similar amount going to
Sure.
Pittsburgh too.
It's true. It's true.
So because I was going to bring my parents too, and so that would have cost money because my parents don't live near an
Right.
international airport like I do.
Right.
And so I just decided I'm going to go to Hungary, and
That's awesome.
I booked the flight right then and there because I had been checking the prices and they were going up, and I know that they're probably even more now. And so I messaged Reka because she had messaged me right before the book launch event, and she asked. It was so funny because I had just seen it pop up on my Facebook, and I might have actually talked about it with my mom about going to the one in Szeged because I'd been planning on a trip to go to Hungary, and winter it's cheaper to go
Yeah,
flight
sure.
wise. And so Reka had sent me that message. And so I had that on my mind. And she said, "Hey, do you want to speak at the event in Szeged?"
Wow.
And so I thought, oh, I'll think on it. I said, "I'll let you know by December." And then it was late October. It was actually the day after the book launch, and I booked the flight. So
That's awesome. So it's funny because my next question was going to be that, you said you felt so at home when you went to Hungary and,
mhm,
tell us about that. And now you have this new experience to look forward
mhm,
to even like bring your feelings closer to home because you're not only having this amazing experience of speaking at the book launch, but you're also going to the little villages
mhm.
where your family is from. And I feel like you could write an entire book on just your experience with the genealogy research and all
Mhm.
of the steps leading up to that. Like I feel there's like a little mini documentary movie happening in your future.
I feel like there's a little documentary in my head when I think of all of it. I mean,
Yeah.
I try and keep it all organized, but sometimes I got lost, and
Yeah.
I like on Family Search, you can save all your sources to a
Hmm.
source box, and I
Yeah.
don't always name them. So sometimes I have to go through, open them up because they're not always indexed, and I have to see, okay, is this for
Right.
Jožef Miklovich or is this for
Hmm.
Katalin Gergel, or
Yeah.
it's because it'll just usually say like Anya Kunvik, and I have to figure out, okay,
Yeah.
well, which town is it from?
I know. I'm so
Here,
excited to hear. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm so excited to hear the report out on this experience when you go. So obviously, we could always make that a podcast episode, or we could just make it a little meeting of the three of us, and we can have coffee and talk about
You
it. Because that
could,
I'm
let's
excited
yeah,
about that for
let's
you.
do that. Let's do that.
for sure.
Aaron, one more question I wanted to ask. You are so young, and yes, you have over a decade experience in genealogy, which is more than I do. Let's be honest here. So, what advice can you give people who are just either starting to research their Hungarian heritage and roots, who are into it but got lost?
Mhm.
What would you tell them?
Yeah.
So I have directly two pieces of advice for people who are honestly just starting out family research in general, but mainly Hungarian research, because I know that we are very grateful that almost all of the um, Catholic, I mean, for my family's Catholic. So all of the Catholic Church records are online and they're easily accessible for free. So one of the things that I would start out with that doesn't necessarily relate with that is that don't be afraid to ask questions and talk with people. I mean, that has done I've never been harmed from it. I mean, I was a pretty anxious kid growing up, so it's kind of funny thinking that I'm going out on my own to do all of this, to talk to all of these people. And I will say, I was scared to respond to messages. I was scared to send messages sometimes. I would sometimes let them sit because I was like anticipating what would go on in that
Right.
message. And so it took a lot of overcoming that, but realizing that people are just out there for the same thing that you are out there for. So they want to help as just as much as you are. And, life gets in the way. You can be busy. You don't have to respond the next minute. I mean, you can take time, but like I said, don't be afraid to join Facebook groups to try. I mean, I've been rejected from Facebook groups and I've messaged the one that rejected me because it was for one of the villages, and she said, "Sorry, you have to live in the village, but I'd be more than happy to share your message to people."
Mm.
And I thought,
So there was a shred of
unfortunately,
kindness there. At least they were still kind enough to share your
I
message.
mean, yeah, but I didn't
Right.
get anything from it either. I mean, it just depends on. I think if I was there in person, it'd be different, but yeah, just don't be afraid to reach out to people, because joining the Hungarian Roots and American Dreams group and reaching out to those people and joining the Hungarian genealogy group, those have all helped me. They have
Right.
done nothing but, I mean, I've learned so much more. I feel like my passion for research has really just like, has gone tenfold. I mean, even though I've been doing research for 12 years now, I mean, I feel like I have been researching more now than I ever have in my entire life. And I've been researching for more than half of my life.
Right.
Um, and then my next tip would be, if you, specifically for people who are researching Hungarian documents, learn how to read Latin and Hungarian, and especially learn how to read cursive when it relates to family research, because it will be hard to read. And I was grateful that I was a part of the generation that they taught cursive to in
Mm-hmm.
school.
Yeah.
So,
You're one of the
um,
last generations that are really, at least in the US, and I'm not sure, Reka, if you know that, but they're really phasing out, which is a shame. Many
mhm.
school districts are phasing
I
out
didn't know
cursive
that. I
terribly.
didn't
I
know that.
I know many people who do not know how to write
Yeah,
cursive, and I still write cursive to this day. It's
I
actually my
do. Yeah.
primary writing style, and so learning that, and so that was mainly for, of course, Hungarian Americans, but there's a lot of things like, because a lot of the documents, for example, a lot of baptism records are indexed, and I mean, I don't know, Reka, I think your family is Reformed. So I don't know if it's the same with the Reformed Church records, but the Catholic Church records, a lot of the marriage and death records are not indexed.
Yes,
And
same for Reform. Just the birth. Yeah.
so yeah, it took a long time. And also just, reading through like the actual documents, and, not just looking at because the problem is that some of the indexes are also wrong. Like, I think
Mhm.
I've seen the last name Shantashi spelled about 10 different ways. And it has barred me from finding some people, but I would have to actually look at the document, and I'd realize, okay, that says Shantashi clearly the way that I know it, because it was just indexed improperly. So, like I said, those would be the two main things. Just don't be
Yeah.
afraid to talk to people, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
So I have a
Um,
question about your answer, actually. So,
yeah.
because I'm sure we're all at some point in our genealogy research, if birth is indexed, the marriage and death, where are they indexed or not indexed, or what's the best route for someone
So,
searching for those documents? Because there's definitely a death
so
certificate I'm looking for.
on Family Search,
Okay.
you do have, so you would want to search up the town or the village in which your family is from.
Okay.
And so you do that, and then under, like, for example, if I put Magyarség, so
Mm-hmm.
I would go under Magyarség and I would click church records. Under church records, typically it'll have like, for example, I think Magyarség has like the Baptista Egyház, which is like 1895 to 1903, and then they also have
Okay.
the Római Katolikus Temple, which is goes from 1743 to
Right.
1895 when they got the Hungarian Civil Registry. So under that, it'll usually have like, it'll say in Hungarian, it'll say like Születés, Halottak, and Házassultak, and it'll say like date ranges. And so
Mm-hmm.
typically the births and the marriages and the deaths will be separated from each other.
Okay.
Sometimes they're put together, but you have to just honestly, it just takes going through, and because
Right.
the images are on there, they're just not
Right.
indexed,
Yeah.
so there's no
Okay.
information taken from it.
Right.
So you just have to go through all of the registers. I mean,
Okay.
it is very time consuming, but I have
Okay.
found out
Yeah.
so much information from it. It is not even funny.
Right.
I mean,
Well, that's a really good tip. And I also feel like sometimes things are updated, as you go along, and like you could look one time and then something
mhm.
may or may not be there. And then you
Yeah.
look again and things are, uploaded. So it's persistence, I think, is what I'm hearing you say, is that
Yeah,
just keep
it
looking. Yeah.
it really is. And the thing is, and if you don't find it in that village, because my family, some of them moved around a lot, some
Yeah.
of them did not.
Right.
And so I will even look at villages that I know that I might not have a connection to, but if I
Mhm.
can look through their registers, if it's
Right.
close enough, it might be in there. And that's
Okay.
actually helped me in the
Yeah.
past. So,
Absolutely. Your
mhm,
life has definitely changed since this
mhm,
doing this research. It changed a little bit when you were younger, and like you just said, your research has exponentially increased and the information that you're finding. And you've told us about like your visit to Hungary and your next visit coming up. So like
mhm.
there's already some things that you've told us that have changed because of your research. Is there any way else that you can share with us about how you feel like your life has changed since this entire experience for you?
I mean, aside from just feeling like I'm 100% Hungarian. I mean, I feel like I have this family here in the States of Hungarian Americans, whether it be people who are also in the group, but I feel like I also have this family over in Hungary that even though we're not all blood related and we
Yeah.
met through this book, I mean, I it really is just a unique community. And I know that there's so many more people out there that could join it too, because so many people went to America and went back to Hungary. So, the Hungarians that I've met here in Chicago through the Magyari Iskola, and the Hungarians that I've met through the Hungarian Roots and American Dreams. I mean, it's like it feels like I have these. I feel like I've known all of these people for my entire life, but because we have so much in common. And these people that vary in ages, people who are closer to my age and people who are in their 70s and 80s. I mean, I feel like we're just like this one big community. And I feel like I could go to Hungary and I would have even if I had no plans, I could find so much to do because I know that I would have so many people there to visit and so many things I could explore there. I mean, I'm looking forward to going to Szeged and being able to meet everyone, especially over there, because you know, I I'm not sure if any other Americans will be there, but
That's super meaningful for you.
it really is. It just like I said, I feel like I have this big Hungarian family.
Yeah. Just think about it. If you never had the initiative or the drive or the curiosity to join these Facebook groups,
hmm
we wouldn't be talking because you and Reka and Anna wouldn't know each other and your
hmm
story wouldn't be in the book. And I'm going to steal Reka's line, which we talk about all the time about stars aligning. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's what's happening for you. But the stars keep coming. The
hmm
alignment continues
And
because
Yeah.
that's amazing.
I can build on that, Christian. I think that there's a path being built out of the stars. I don't know where it leads
I
hmm
agree.
yet,
Yeah.
but there is a clear path being built, and we are all walking on it
Yeah,
somewhere.
I agree.
it,
And I don't
you
even
know,
know if it leads us to a particular place, but I think it's just like the journey where we just keep
Yeah,
adding people
hmm
to our community. Even when I started this podcast, like just to connect people. And
hmm
Aaron, I'm sure that you can attest that when you started researching, you never realized that you'd be where you are right now, because that's how I feel. So it's just amazing that we keep going forward and meeting new people and meeting each other, and it's to me it's so fulfilling.
and I firmly believe, and I've said this before, kind of similar to the stars aligning. I believe everything happens for a reason.
I agree.
I don't believe in coincidences. It's like one thing that I realized from growing up. My hometown, Rockford, Illinois, has a sister city program, and one of the last sister cities that was added was a little village in Somogy County, Hungary, called
Wow.
Tasar. And it turns out that my great great grandmother's mother and her sister lived in Tassar for a long time, and my family's from
Wow.
that area. and lived there for a while. So I mean, it's so weird seeing that there's been this connection with my hometown and a
Hmm.
village in Hungary that my family lived in Hungary, and I didn't realize it until it was probably earlier this year that I realized like, oh, I have family that lived in Tasar. I mean, that's where my third great grandmother, Teresia Miklovic, that's where she lived when she passed away. So
It's pretty
the
incredible that like you're
the
so close to that
hmm
connection and you've been close to that connection and didn't
hmm
maybe didn't know about it at first.
I, and I never realized it. And I just having that and having, if you'd asked me about a year ago that I would be, first of all, that I'd be going to Hungary again. I mean, I'd
Yeah.
be excited for that because, I always talk about, oh, I'm going to go soon. I'm going to go soon. And
Yeah.
I never really had like a big reason to go besides just goofing around in the villages. But now I feel like I really have a purpose to go. And if you would have asked me that, I would have had this story shared and I would have been able to meet all these wonderful people and Reka and Anna and been able to connect myself with this international Hungarian community. I mean, I would have said, "You're crazy." I
I
mean,
know, right? I
I,
know.
I would have never thought. I'm not very good at writing. I'm not very good at writing. I like writing, but I write a lot of stuff for work and emails, and so I got tired, and I will say it took me a long time to muster through that book. I mean, I think I got to the deadline that was set for us originally pretty late, and it was pretty close to the deadline. I was like, oh my goodness, I hope they still accept this. And I didn't know that there was only like a few stories submitted by then, but it's interesting seeing all these people that have this common goal as you, and you have the same ideas and same wishes and the same perspectives as these people. You don't realize how many people like that are out there
Yeah.
because, as Americans, we think of America is a very individualistic society.
Hmm.
And so you really only think about yourself. You don't look at
Right.
the larger picture. And so seeing that all these Hungarian Americans and Hungarians, we all kind of do have the same ideas and picture, and there's things that we all grew up with that are similar, and the goyash that Naj Papa made or Naj Mama, like I mean my mom remembers eating Hungarian food growing up, and
Yeah.
I remember my first time making palachinta and we really screwed it up badly and it was not good. And I was like 10 years old, but I really do feel like everything happens for a reason, and everything has brought us together, sitting here right now today, and for what's next to come on this road, I wouldn't even necessarily call it a path or a road. I'd call it an expressway because it feels like it's going so fast and there's just so much.
Yeah, I agree. It's sometimes it's hard to digest all of the things because you're so excited
Hmm
to
Yeah.
go in all those directions.
And I think it's the instant connection that we made, Aaron, that's really strange for me in a way because I never met Christine, I never met you in
hmm
person, but and it happened with almost everyone in the
hmm
group who contributed to the book. So I don't know, is it because our roots are similar? Or is it because
hmm
the direction we are going is similar? I don't know, but there is this chemistry that really cements us together.
I agree. I agree. And like that chemistry happens on different levels because, all three of us have like this big journey that we're on, but even some of the other people that have like of the authors that have contributed to your book, they were just there to tell their story, but even on a smaller level, you're connecting with them and seeing that they have the same sentiment of feelings about their Hungarian culture, which is pretty great.
And Aaron, you talked a lot about what it means to you to be Hungarian. You also mentioned that you are pursuing Hungarian citizenship, learning the language. And I would be curious to hear what are your plans for the future. So how you wanna maintain or grow this feeling of being Hungarian and how you plan to continue being connected to this heritage.
So, I plan to, of course, get my Hungarian citizenship, and I want to be able to visit Hungary more. I hope on my next trip there that I'm able to meet more relatives. Not just only connecting with my relatives, but also just keeping Hungarian heritage in my family for my kids and my grandkids to, continue because, I mean, even though my grandfather passed away, right when I was asking those questions, I mean, I still knew I was Hungarian and I knew, that Boris was a Hungarian name and that his grandparents had come here and just one of the biggest things that has been so important for me is keeping my grandfather's memory alive through being Hungarian and through sharing those stories because I mean even though I wasn't able to do much with it when he was alive, I'm able to do it after he is gone, and I found out so much more after he is gone. And so, of course, the dream is to have a vacation home in Hungary, and go there every summer or every winter. And I would love to do that. I would love to take my mom to Hungary. I know she would really, really like that. I think she wants to go to England first, though, which I don't blame her. But
We could do a stopover on the way, right? You do a stopover. So you have all these big things on the horizon for you, which are amazing. And specifically, I know you're going to go to those towns. What are the next steps in your genealogy research? Like, what specifically do you have? Like, two people you're looking for, a specific town that you're going to? Tell us about what's coming up for you next.
So one of the things that I'm trying to research right now, so because of the citizenship laws in Hungary, if you left for more than 10 years, you lost your citizenship before 1929. And so I want to find out because on my great great grandfather's death certificate, because he died in 1941, on his death certificate, it says he was a Hungarian citizen. Now, how this would have been able to been proved, I'm not sure. But if he had like a passport or some sort of like letter of being alive, I mean, it could have been possible. I mean, because the consulate was open in 1922 in Chicago.
Okay.
And so I want to go to one of my next things is going to the archives in Budapest and looking at the registers of, visas and passports and all that were issued because it might be easier for me to get citizenship if he did get a new passport at some point. But like I said, I'm not sure. I mean, I still have the documents to do the other way, but that's one of my main things. Another thing is my great great grandfather Janos, his mother. I can't find her parents' birth records because for some reason the Catholic Church records from like 1790 to 1820 for births in Hosuhetén are missing. I can't find them anywhere online. So it's like a dead end. And so
I mean,
I'm trying
it's a
to
long
find
time
more
ago.
on that.
Yeah, it's a long time ago, and who knows, they might have had like a fire or some type of like
Yeah.
situation that prevented
But they have the
those
marriage and
records.
death records from those
Oh,
from those
okay.
times. So that's what I find weird. It's
Oh,
just maybe it's just not online. And
maybe.
in a lot of the unindexed pages, I
Right.
also notice a lot of issues. Like there's a lot of rescanned pages. There's a lot of blurry pages. It just makes me think like, okay, it's probably still out there, but I just probably have to see it in person. So those are my two next things. And of course the Hungarian citizenship. That's I think that's the biggest thing
those are pretty big deals.
Pursuing right now.
Yeah, those are pretty big things. So I'm definitely excited to follow your story because I feel like it just keeps going, and the more you know, the bigger your family reach will be, which is pretty exciting for you.
It is.
Thank you so much, Erin, for being with us here today and sharing your story. I think it's so inspirational, even for me, being a Hungarian, but just listening to you, what it means to you, how you think about it, and how you get your energy, your passion, your determination from it. It's really, really amazing. So thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you in Szeged.
And thank you, Reka. And I can't wait to be able to meet you there as well. And America, you came to this country and you left all your other cultures behind. But kind of like I mentioned in the opening of my story, I feel like it's different for Hungarian Americans. I feel like there's always that sense of being Hungarian that just stays there. And so I'm very, very proud to have that. I'm very proud to be part of this culture and this book and this amazing community, that you and Anna have been able to build. And, I mean, it's just wonderful. And I'm very grateful to be able to be on this podcast, Christine, and be able to share my story with everyone and to just be able to get more perspectives. And maybe someone will be listening like I was on the way to work and think, hey,
Right.
I want to look into my family history now.
Exactly. And honestly, that's exactly what I want when I publish an episode. I want people to hear stories and say to themselves, well, I might be interested in that as well. Let me do a little bit more research into, whatever the topic of the episode is. So I feel like I can't thank you enough for agreeing to be on this episode with Reka and myself to tell your story, because people don't realize sometimes how much of an inspiration they are to other people. Personally, I'm also so inspired by your dedication, your stick-to-itiveness, and just like your curiosity. And I know you said that you were shy or, a little, reserved when you were younger, but you wouldn't know that now because you're definitely doing great things with your genealogy research, both personally, and I feel like you are a huge inspiration to everyone out there. We will definitely leave some information in the show notes to get people started if they're interested in following some of the same paths that you followed. In addition to the Facebook groups and, of course, Reka and Anna's Facebook group with Hungarian Roots and American Dreams. And I can't thank you enough, Reka, for agreeing to be my co-host in this new little series in season 3 and for sharing some of your authors in your book. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be here with both of you today. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I look forward to future conversations with both of you.
Thanks for joining me and Reka Bakos today on this episode of the Hungarian Heritage Podcast. We were both delighted to celebrate Hungarian heritage together with our guest, Aaron Melville, as he shared his Hungarian heritage story that was included in the Hungarian Roots and American Dreams book. If you're interested in purchasing a copy of the book, either in English or in Hungarian, or if you're interested in joining the Facebook groups that were mentioned in this episode, you will find all of that information in the show notes, as well as how you can get in contact with Reka Bakos. If you have feedback or questions about this episode, or you would like to connect with me at the podcast, you will also find that information in the show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode and you're interested in learning more about this Hungarian heritage community, please do not hesitate to reach out. I would love to hear from you. Our theme music is Hungarian Dance by Pony Music, used with special license from Envato Market. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, make sure you stay Hungarian Heritage Strong. Sziasztok!